Hey, Scott from Aristocab.com here.
Cal from Denver.
And Seth from theshrinkingpastor.com.
And together, the four of us, once again, we are Markwood Men's Breakfast Club. This is a continuation from last week's episode. My dad is in town from Denver, and we thought this is such a rare occasion we would go ahead and film an episode, and we carried it over to this week. So, hey, welcome back. What have you been doing the last week here in North Carolina, Dad?
Freezing. No, actually, I was just soaking in the rain.
But doesn't the humidity make it colder?
It does.
The cold feels colder here than it does in Colorado.
We notice 32, 33 degrees is a lot colder.
Yeah.
Yep.
I noticed that
because
too
of the humidity.
in my travels. So.
Yep.
So when we wrapped up, you were talking a little bit about your time in Vietnam. Now, we talked about this in the video that we filmed together 2 years ago, I think it was.
Yep. Something like that.
So I don't know if we need to go into too much more detail in that, because after your time in Vietnam, your Air Force career continued, right?
Yes. Let me back up a little bit.
Okay.
Those of you who saw the first video that we did some time back, I talked about a nighttime mission that was a single airplane with 2 guys in the airplane. I did that for my first 54 missions, and then I got out of that Ryan's Raider program and got into what was called Day Strike. And so the tale I just finished telling about going along Route 5 from Laos into North Vietnam was a daytime story. And at that time I was flying Strike, and I was flying with 3 other guys in a 4-ship formation, or 15 other guys in a 16-ship formation, depending on the mission. And I did that for the second half of my tour over there.
You were saying that, well, first off, this was really exciting because somebody watching our video from that last time recognized either you, your name, the story, something about what we were talking about, connected with somebody, and they in turn contacted you. Can you?
Yeah. There was a photograph that Scott put on there from that first time period when I was flying the night missions, Ryan's Raider, when the other guy that I was flying with, John Rim, finished his 100 missions, and it was at his 100 mission party. One of the things they do is they give you a bottle of champagne if you're not a teetotaler like I am, and ride you around the base on a cannon, an artillery piece that's got a saddle on it, and all the Thai and American airmen and workers there cheer and shout and everything, and then you end up at the officers club and get thrown into the pool. Well,
this is right after you land, right? So you're still fully.
Yeah.
Do the teetotalers get to ride in the saddle?
Yeah. Well, I rode in the saddle, but mine was later. Okay, John finished his 100. Well, by the time he got to the pool, he had consumed most of that bottle of champagne. So the picture that we had there was John and me getting out of the water, dripping wet, and John was becoming relaxed. Well, his son recognized his dad in the picture, and I don't know whether John had a copy of it or not, that he'd actually seen the picture or just what it was, but he contacted Scott. I ended up getting in contact with John that I hadn't heard from since that day when he finished his 100 missions.
Now, you were saying that he was a B-52 navigator, but he was the pilot.
And I was a pilot, and so he ended up in the front seat flying the airplane, and I ended up in the back seat navigating.
Makes perfect sense.
Makes sense in the Air Force, okay? There's more to that story. It wasn't that dumb, but it was sure irritating. Okay? So,
yeah, but you were saying that his style and your style were different in one way, right? In particular,
in a number of ways.
Okay, I want to hear the one that you were Seth to hear the story too.
Which way are you talking about?
I'm talking about the note taking that he expected.
SAC navigators are trained to take meticulous notes during the mission, and one thing in particular is every turn point, every navigation point, and especially time on target has to be recorded very precisely.
Manually. Recorded manually.
Manually, yeah.
Put
in a flight log. Yeah, this was before computer days. Actually, we had a computer in the 105, but man, it was a 1952 vintage. Okay, so you can imagine. So anyway, when we'd get back, we'd be going through the debriefing and filling out all the reports, and John would say, "What was our TOT?" And I'd say, "I don't know. What was it supposed to be?" You know, we took off. We took off on time, and we
hit the target.
We hit the target, and we got back on time. It must have been what we planned. I don't pay attention to those kind of unimportant details, but John was a SAC navigator, and I thought it was important.
So, and to him it was.
To him it was, yeah.
So, and then you were doing different missions, though, with the F-105, because did you always fly a two-place?
On the night missions, they were always two-place.
Always.
On the day missions, they were always one-place.
Okay.
On the day missions, the two-place airplanes were the Wild Weasel airplanes, and that was different crews with different skills, and they were the ones that went in and found the radars with instrumentations on the airplane, the radars that were guiding the missiles, the surface-to-air missiles, and then they would attempt to shut them down or attack the sites.
Mm-hmm.
So, very hazardous mission.
We shared your in that other video. We shared the patch, the Ryan's
Ryan's
Raiders
Raider,
guy.
yeah, that was the front seat, back seat issue. Yeah.
You've seen that patch, boy.
Probably.
Okay.
So after,
good. We can edit that out then.
Yeah. After I finished my 100 missions, I came back to the States and went to Washington, D.C. Andrews Air Force Base had the headquarters of Air Force Systems Command. Systems Command was the organization that bought all the airplanes and tankers and so forth that the Air Force used. I was there for about 3 years, and then I went over to the Pentagon for another 3.5 years. We didn't move geographically, but I changed jobs and job locations there. So we were there 6.5 years. Had one more child, which is Scott's youngest sister.
Did it take that long to have Jill?
Yep, because I was gone.
Oh, sure. Okay. Makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, and then your job then completely changed. You're no longer flying at that point. Is that right?
Yes, I was in an analysis group both at Systems Command headquarters and the Pentagon, and what we did was worked on concepts that led to what airplane and what characteristics do they need for the future. And at that time, not only airplanes but missiles, at that time the concepts that were going were the BX, which was the bomber experimental, which became the B-1 bomber, the AX, which became the A-10, the MX, which became the Peacekeeper missile, the FX, which became the F-15. So we were doing the early requirements development. Okay, what should they look like and what should they do? And then the contractors took those specifications and went and designed the competing airplanes and missiles and so forth.
Now, isn't that a time too where every branch of the military wanted their own completely unique weapon systems, even if there was one being developed that could have been used by the other? They wanted their own cup holders, or
you can't yes, you can't say a time, because that's all the
always
time.
Okay.
That never goes away. But yes, there was competition going on during that time. Yep. The F-16, the lightweight fighter concept, was developed when I was in the Pentagon, and out of the competition between the F-16 and the F-17, which were two flyable prototypes, the F-16 won, the Air Force developed it, the F-17 lost, the Navy redesigned it and developed it. It's now the FA-18. So those kind of things were just in their very early stages during the period that I was there.
The Navy won that because there were two engines?
Navy was totally committed to two engines, yes.
And the Air Force said, how about a good engine?
One good one's better, two mediocre ones. Of course, the FA-18 engine is
the same,
splendid.
Right? Yeah.
No, it's not the same as ours. The F-15 engines are the same as the F-16.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you know so much about the F-16. Why is that?
Because my last assignment was as the deputy director of the F-16 program. That was back at Dayton for another tour. And
so initially back in Dayton, I was We went to Air War College, right?
Yeah.
So like mid-70s?
Yes, we went from D.C. to Montgomery, Alabama for a year of Air War College, and that was 74 and 75.
Okay.
Summers, one summer to the next. And then back to Dayton. I was the director of the Flight Simulator Program Office for 3 years there. And that was while we were starting the development of new flight simulators, very modern, highly capable flight simulators for all the airplanes the Air Force had. And then I went from there to the F-16 program, just as they were starting full production of the airplane. They'd gone through a long testing phase with prototype airplanes, and then started the production.
I remember when you were with the simulator program, because we got to go and play with one of the simulators, which was it was a refueling plane, right? So it was a simulator for the person who's going to be at the tail end and flying the boom, the
refueling boom
down into the jet that was flying up. And this was around the same era as Star Wars, or what was going to be Star Wars. And I remember seeing on TV, they were showing how they filmed the Star Wars. It's like, this is exactly what we were seeing at the simulator program, where you had a model that was in a whole other area, and you had a scene that was flowing by. So you're laying there on your stomach looking out a window onto what were computer screens, TVs, whatever they were.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing the scenery going by, and then this plane flies up, and it was a completely different thing than the scene. So it was like a green screen or something.
I don't remember that.
However it was done, it was just like what we then later saw, how they filmed a bunch of the Star Wars stuff.
Yeah, that was a simulator that was actually designed and built by the engineers that worked for me. The rest of the simulators were being designed by contractors, by companies. But those guys wanted to build one. They took the tail section out of a wrecked KC-135, which was the tanker airplane at that time, and refurbished it. And then they built all the other parts. Had a scale model of the refueling boom about that big that was on another camera.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
so I guess it wasn't 40 feet
no
long, was it?
No. Well, the real one is. But
Yeah.
but the model one wasn't. They built that, tested it, brought refueling people out from the training base for the refuelers, and trained some of them on it. One of the technicians that worked on it was a young girl. She was a college graduate, but she was pretty young to me, and she had spent an awful lot of time on her stomach flying that thing. Well, they took her up in a real airplane, and she refueled a B-52 with no other training, so it was good.
That's neat.
Yeah, it was.
Well, that was such a neat experience for a young guy to go in and see all these things. That was fun. You said that you learned something during that period about motion.
Yes.
What did you learn?
Well, one of the arguments was that you can't simulate the sensations you have in an airplane on the ground. The fighter pilots especially didn't want simulators. They wanted to fly airplanes and not fly simulators. So most of the simulators were supposed to be up on hydraulic legs so that they could move it around and give you the sensation of rolling and pitching and pulling G's. That's awfully hard to do. And during that time, a number of research simulators had been built around the country, and so we set up different programs using them to simulate some of the fighters to see what you could do and what you couldn't do. We pretty much found that the visual system, if you gave the guy a good visual system, that gave him all the motion cues that he needed to be able to forget that he was not in an airplane, and that was the goal.
So our brain fills in the rest.
Yeah, the training had to be there. We found that if the visual and the motion system weren't exactly in sync with each other, you would induce motion sickness more than anything else. And if anybody had any tendency toward motion sickness, that would do it for them.
Yeah.
So we were gradually whittling away the cost and complexity of the simulators by proving that the motion really wasn't that important. We ended up with it on the big airplane simulators and not on the fighter simulators.
I mean, anybody who's ever played one of the video games, car racing, helicopter flying, whatever, has had that experience where even the ones that don't jostle you around, you get the sensation that you've just slammed your car into the wall.
Well, sit in a car at the stoplight with your foot on the brake and be kind of looking down and have the car next to you start to move. You'll immediately have the sensation that you're rolling backwards.
Yeah.
And it's very real. We had a research lab back at Wright-Patterson that was trying to work this G-force thing, and they did some studies and said that it's just the hard, bony part of your buttocks that senses the G-forces. So they built a seat that had two little hydraulic actuators right at the bony parts, that as you pull G's in the simulator, it would press them up against your buttocks a little harder than...
So it would feel like you're pulling down.
Well, that was the goal. And my deputy director in the simulator program office was a great big Polak. Okay, I won't tell you his name.
Polak?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
He was an Air Force colonel, but he was a big guy. Okay, and he sat in it, and when he got through, he says, "Well, I felt something going on down there, but it wasn't pulling G's." Stop that program.
Did he request the seat?
Yeah,
We're not going to be using this. So you already mentioned then that you moved from the simulator program to the F-16 program.
Yeah.
So I was I think 12 or 13 when we moved back to Dayton. So I was born in '63, and then we moved back in '76ish. 75, 76?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was 12 or 13. So we had been away from everything that you'd accomplished from my birth to that time happened in that scope of 12 years.
Yep.
So all the time in Washington, D.C., in Vietnam, and so on. You packed an awful lot into those.
Yeah, about every 3 years, you went and did something different. Yeah.
And then F-16 program, does that, do you have any fond memories of that?
Oh,
or?
yeah, lots of them.
Yeah.
I was picked for that deputy job. The program director was a two-star general, and he was a brilliant guy as far as program structure and content was concerned. This was a 5-nation program. We had 4 European countries plus the U.S. involved in not only getting the airplanes and flying them, but actually in producing them, building and assembling and so forth. So it's very complex, and the general was an expert at that.
General Abe, right?
General Abramson.
Abramson.
Yeah,
Okay.
he was the Star Wars general, if you remember back during Ronald Reagan's days. This was before he got into that. The program office under him had grown from 75 people to about 450, and the 3-star general that ran Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the Systems Command group there, observed that Abe's management style didn't work well with that big an organization, so he sent me over to work the structure of that group. So Abe was Mr. Outside and I was Mr. Inside for the program, and it was, again, a very rewarding thing to see the guys form teams and start doing what they were supposed to do.
Now, one of my favorite stories about that time, and this has very little to do with the F-16 program, but you were driving an old Pinto that was slowly but surely falling apart.
Yes.
So Dad, being a handyman, would go to one of those, picket pull-it kind of a lot and buy a replacement door when his door rusted through. We were living in Dayton, Ohio, where they salted the roads mercilessly.
Yes, you could
and
hear them rust.
Just destroyed the cars. And I remember that you would replace a body part on the yellow Pinto, but you didn't paint it.
Well, that's right.
So what did we wind up with?
The rear hatch, the door, that was the first one they had, the big window in the rear hatch, and that was replaced with a dark green door. I was rear-ended when I was at the Pentagon by a big dump truck that crushed the whole body behind me right up against the back seat, right above the gas tank.
Right above the gas tank.
And it just smashed it in. Well, the insurance company and the auto dealers decided it could be repaired, so they cut off that part of the car and put a new one on. And where they welded it on the left rear upper quarter panel, it rusted through very quickly. So I had that Rust-Oleum colored, okay, the red Rust-Oleum, and then I can't remember what the problem was, but something crushed the driver's door, and so I replaced it with a
blue one,
with a light blue one, yes. And the guys at work called it Joseph.
Because at that time we were selling the F-16 to other allies around the world, right?
Yes.
And wasn't it somebody from Israel who deemed it Joseph, or was
No,
that not?
I don't remember. It could have been. Yeah,
I think I remember that, somebody coming in asking, so who owns Joseph?
Yes.
Well,
I drove it with pride. It was
and
a
you
good-
parked
was
it
a
right
good
up
car.
front, right?
Of
You got
course.
a great parking spot in your position.
Yep.
What's that?
Explain Joseph.
And it's coat of many colors.
Joseph in
People
the
who may
coat
not
of many colors.
Read your
Just
Bible.
think Donny Osmond or the
Yeah.
Bible, whichever
Yeah.
whichever has the most influence on you. All right. So then you retired from the Air Force in 81,
81.
and then what'd you do?
Moved back home to Denver after a quarter of a century, and went to work for Lockheed Martin.
They took you back?
They did. Oh, no, it was Martin Marietta when I went to work
Oh,
for
so all those records had been
Yeah.
expunged.
That's
and They didn't remember you.
I tried to, later on Martin and Lockheed merged and it became Lockheed Martin, and I tried to get my year that I had spent back added to my time for retirement purposes, and they wouldn't buy it. It had only been 25 years. So at Martin Marietta, I worked on the Peacekeeper missile program, which was also a very rewarding program. If you don't know, the flight test program on that was 100% success. 100% of the missiles did what they were supposed to do, and 100% of warheads on target.
That doesn't happen often.
Doesn't
right?
happen hardly ever, and that was a great team to be on for that.
Now, I remember at the time when that was being touted, there was a plan to put them on. Well, there was a number of ways they were
Yeah.
thinking about deploying them. Right?
Yes.
They were going to put them on a train,
The-
put some dummies on trains,
The,
and
the original one was going to go on into tunnels on the mountains around the deserts in the United States, and the launcher would be, the missile would be in a tube cantilevered out from a launcher, which was a big heavy tractor-like thing, in a tunnel in the mountain, and it would come out to the end of the tunnel, raise the missile up, and launch it. And they went from that to putting them on rail cars and moving them around the nation when we got warning of some kind so that they couldn't target them, and we had a rail car that was designed to erect the missile and launch it. And they ended up then putting them in Minuteman silos, taking a Minuteman out.
and all of this was mutually assured destruction. Right?
Yes.
The plan was not to ever have to launch them, but if the
Keep
Soviets
keep the threat
at the time, if they were going to launch and take us out, then by golly, by gosh, the last thing we were going to do would be to launch our missiles as well, and that kept their fingers off the button, right?
Yep. My view of that was two guys sitting at the end of the table. Their guns are pointing at each other, but the triggers are controlled by a cable that the other guy has.
And it worked, right?
It worked, yes.
Yeah. Again, the difference today where we have an enemy who wants to die, would love to get a hold of a nuke and set it off.
Yeah, whether you can make that concept work with our current adversaries is debatable. Yeah.
There's a deep thought right there.
Yeah.
Well, boy, what kind of questions might you ask your grandfather? You've been sitting here hearing about his experience and careers and things. Did you know all of that?
Not all of it, no.
Yeah.
No. A good bit of it. Not all of it. I don't know.
I mean, in your time off, you're a Sunday school teacher,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
What else?
I'm president of the Homeowners Association for a 58 patio home community. Get paid $0 for Sunday school teaching and being the president.
Yeah.
If anybody doesn't like the way the snow's being removed or not,
You get a phone
I get a phone
call.
call or an email, and it's always the same two guys. So
But you've had to deal
Very
with
ridiculous.
things from from the what is the deal with the soil out there? It
Well,
expands, or what do they call that?
Yeah, we live on a area of Denver. There's a lot of them in Denver that are like this, that are on bentonite soil. It's a highly expansive soil. It expands from dry to wet up to 60% of volume.
Wow.
So the houses have to be built a certain way, and you have to be very careful about keeping water drained away from them and so forth. And one of the big challenges is in that was that our builder didn't do an awful lot of the building well. So we ended up in a construction defect lawsuit that lasted about 2 years before we finally won it, and then about 2 years worth of major repairs to houses that basically program management stuff like I did at Martin and Air Force.
So you assess who needs the work,
Yeah.
the worst, and
Yes.
and then the hail comes,
And then the
hail
comes.
takes out the roofs, and
Every 7 years on the average we lose our roofs. So,
golly,
yeah, it's keeps you busy.
yeah.
You know, one of the things that I've enjoyed in my whole life is variety. You know, I don't like to do anything for too long, and you can tell from my Air Force career that
A Markwood trait.
there was a
It is.
good variety. And at Martin, I've worked on 8 or 9 totally different programs. The Super Collider program, which was to be a big cyclotron down in Texas that didn't actually get built, but we spent a lot of time in the planning phase of that. Satellite programs, so forth. So it's been good.
Did you ever get to fly an F-16?
I did it one time. So I got my 9G pin.
So you,
Wow.
when you became a lieutenant colonel, you were no longer permitted to fly. What's the deal with
When
that?
I became a full colonel.
Okay.
When you get promoted to full colonel, you can only fly if you are in an operational position, and I was in a desk position during
Okay.
that time.
And that's to keep you from doing something stupid.
Yeah,
too-
and
Too valuable an asset at that point.
the fuel was the valuable asset. The guys that have the mission of flying the airplanes need the time. You know.
Okay.
So I got to fly in one of the engineering development airplanes, the 2-place airplane that they built, with one of the F-16 test pilots,
Neat.
and out of Edwards Air Force Base, and it was pretty exciting.
That's neat.
It would
It's good.
almost turn where you looked.
Really?
Yeah.
I always wondered, and I may have mentioned this in the other video, why you didn't become a commercial pilot. Because in my mind as a kid, a pilot's a pilot. Why wouldn't you want to go fly a whole bunch of passengers around?
Because that's driving. That's not flying. Okay? If you can't get upside down at least once on every mission, you've wasted the mission. Okay. And that was my logo.
Did you see the movie with Denzel Washington? Flying the plane upside down? I mean, it can be done.
Yeah, if you're in Hollywood.
I met a guy recently who was in active duty in the Army, and I asked him, you know, what did he do? He said, well, I was a taxi driver. Really? So yeah, I would take people from here to there. I said, okay. What people? The people they told me. Okay. Turns out he flew Black Hawks.
Oh.
And and he was dropping you know,
Special forces.
yeah, off into enemy territory. But that's how he thought of himself. I'm just a taxi. I just took him where they told me to take him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, what? I'll throw this back to you, boy. Anything else you'd like to ask Grandpa while he's here? It can't be about me either.
Oh, now
That opens
it's
up
a
a whole
world of opportunity. Did you always know that he would become so famous?
Don't answer that.
Yeah.
At what
Did I know-
age?
did I know
yes,
he would become so
yes.
famous, or the
At
other
what
way?
age? At what age did Dad's head become so big?
We worry a lot about Scott. You know, when he comes around us, when he's been around us and he leaves, my wife and I look at each other and say, whose kid really do you think he is?
And why is that?
It's because you're just so different in your personality. from ours. But he looks so much like his sisters, he must be ours.
Yeah.
So
And I laugh like you, so
must be it.
must be that's it. Well, thank you, Dad, for spending time with us.
You're welcome. It's good to be here.
Good to see you. Now, next, these guys want to see you smoke a pipe.
Probably won't happen.
Well, maybe on the way back from the tattoo parlor.
Bubbles. Yeah, tattoos. It's been fun.
How about a beard? Not even a beard.
Not even.
I remember going camping with you as a kid, and several days of being in the woods, you'd come out and you'd have at least the 5 o'clock shadow going. And
always shaved.
No. When we were going, as the boys only.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was not
Up in the
camping.
Shenandoahs, yeah.
Right. Not camping
With
in
the
the
family.
pop-up camper with a family. And I always thought, why don't you let that grow? It looks kind of cool. It's just not you, is it?
Wasn't part of the uniform.
No. I think you said something about Grandma taught you that clean shaven is clean or something like that.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. I'll remember
It's possible.
it for you.
Yeah, remember it for me. I need a lot of help remembering things these days.
Yeah. Now you seem to be doing all right. All right, we'll wrap it up. Guys, thanks again for watching and for joining us. We will see you again next week.
I hope some of your dads knew who I was and could connect me with them
Get in
again.
touch, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.